Alrighty. Well, hey, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Monterey Bay Aquarium and the Monterey Bay Aquarium Research Institute's social media feeds this morning. We are live right now for Science Fridays Cephalopod Week 2021. Make sure that you are hashtagging Cephalopod Week wherever you are. Make sure you're heading over to the MBARI, to MBARI's websites and also to the Aquarium's websites to find your very own Zoom cephalopod themed backgrounds and other fun things for all of y'all. If you're wondering who is talking to you, my name is Patrick. I'm under all the logos right over here on the upper right of your screen. Yeah, there we go. Upper right of the screen for everybody. If anything breaks during this broadcast, that would be my fault. So right over here, if you could just let everybody in the chat know that you can hear us, that we're coming through live, loud and clear. Let us know. Otherwise, we'll do some troubleshooting there. But we're very, very excited to have with us an esteemed panel of guests to talk all about cephalopods, our mollusk friends there that have their own very special week. We don't have Snail Week quite yet, but Cephalopod Week, certainly always a fun tradition. Just to introduce to you who we've got here on the screen. Directly below me over here, we've got Susan Von Thun, George Matsumoto over here, and then we've got Cassie. I don't know why I'm blanking on your name right now, Cassie, but Cassie's down there on the bottom there, and they are part of the Monterey Bay Aquarium Research Institute, or MBARI's social media feeds and science communication channels. So if you're in the chats on their accounts, you are getting your questions answered directly by these fast fingers over here. All the way on the opposite side of the screen from me, we've got the better half of the Monterey Bay Aquarium social media team, and Emily. There's Emily over there, and Emily will be monitoring the chat for questions during this live stream. Emily, how you doing over there? Doing good?
Yeah, doing incredible, Pat.
Incredible. That's right, here for Cephalopod Week. And then to the left over here on your screen, next to me, we have our amazing cephalopod scientists that will be telling us all about their research and the cool things going on there in the ocean. So directly next to me, we've got Ben Burford here, and then Crissy Huffard. And look at that squid shirt. Yes. Rocking the squid shirt. We've got baby squids behind Crissy and Ben. Just very quickly, Crissy, Ben, welcome to the live stream. Maybe starting with you, Crissy, can you introduce us a little bit to you and your work? What we'll be talking about today?
Hey. So I'm Crissy Huffard. I have a background in cephalopod behavior and biology, and I love studying cephalopods in their natural habitat, following them around in the water, understanding how they find food, mates, defend themselves from predators, and really survive to make it to the next generation.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that, Crissy. And then Ben, can you tell us what you've got going on?
Sweet. Yeah, well, I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me. I just finished my PhD in cephalopod behavior and ecology. So the information is still fresh, hopefully. And now I've moved on to study salmon, but I'm always trying to get back with cephalopods. So it's awesome to be here. And I especially love how they communicate with each other, but I'm also into every facet of their lives.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for that, Ben. For whatever reason, it seems like Zoom has decided to change up its UI once again, so apologies for the rough transitions there between the spotlights. But before we get started, before we launch into all of your questions, we just want to do what we always do, which is introduce the Monterey Bay Aquarium Research Institute to all of you out there. I'm sure the folks on the MBARI social media channels know, but if anyone's watching on the aquariums or tuning in for the first time, the Monterey Bay Aquarium Research Institute is located about 20 miles north of the bay. Oh my goodness gracious. I started off real strong on my intro, and then it appears that my HDMI connection is throwing up a red screen of doom there. That's fun.
Oh no.
Hey, Emily, while I fix that real quick, do you want to... Oh, goodness. Oh. Let's see. Okay. Hey, Emily, do you want to go to a question real quick?
Yeah, I have questions already. In fact, awesome. I think that this is going to be a a nice, easy one to kind of introduce what we're doing right now. Crissy and Ben, could you tell us what is a cephalopod? We are celebrating Cephalopod Week right now. We have some people tuning in who might not be familiar with that word. So what is a cephalopod?
Crissy, can I just start by saying head foot? Yeah.
Yes.
Head foot. There we go.
Go for it, Ben.
Head foot. That's what cephalopods are.
Yeah.
Nice.
Nailed it.
Succinct.
Moving on. All right.
Well, I can elaborate a touch. My favorite flavor of the cephalopod is the squid, but there's a few different flavors. There's squids, octopuses, cuttlefish, and nautiluses. And they're all related to your garden snail. They're all mollusks, but they're kind of this mid-water. They're this mollusk that can swim around in the ocean, in the ocean's mid-waters. So I always tell people, when you think of like cephalopod, especially squid, stuff like that, think of like the snail's equivalent of a fish. That's what I always say. But that's a little bit deeper. What do you got to say, Crissy?
Yeah, I think that's true. And acknowledging that a lot of cephalopods do live in the midwater, but there are also ones that live close to the seafloor or on the seafloor. Octopuses live on the seafloor and crawl around, and cuttlefishes, sometimes they crawl on the seafloor and sometimes they hover and spend most of their time just within a couple of meters of the seafloor.
Yeah, you're talking about animals without a backbone. They have two eyes like we do. Usually they have fins, though not always. Some of them push themselves around with jet propulsion as well. But these are animals that usually can move themselves. Some of them have an external shell, but most do not. And they're kind of soft, sort of squishy, but some are more muscular than others.
Yeah. And
Crissy, go ahead.
Go ahead, Emily.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, Patrick, I see you smiling at the screen. Is everything okay? Or do you...
Well, who
need more
knows?
questions?
But we'll give it a shot. If anyone wants to hear a quick little intro about MBARI, once again, I can certainly try that out there. Emily, look, I've got a side by side. Okay, let me try this one more time. All right. So the Monterey Bay Aquarium Research Institute, you're looking at it right here, is located about 20 miles north of the aquarium, near Moss Landing and near Elkhorn Slough. You folks may have heard of Elkhorn Slough. That's where we tend to release our rescued sea otter pups. Here is the Rachel Carson, one of the research vessels that MBARI has. Aboard the Rachel Carson are a lot of different scientific instruments, including ROVs, or remotely operated vehicles. This one right here is called the Ventana, literally our window into the deep sea. And that's how we're going to be looking at a lot of the deep sea footage today of cephalopods. And aboard those ROVs are cameras and scientific instruments that allow scientists to spend hours on end in the deep sea, in the crushing depths there, without having to send down endless scuba tanks for everybody hanging out forever down there. Back aboard the ships, you've got the scientists in the control room taking a look at all of the various video footage there. And so that is how we're going to be showing you some of those videos there of organisms in the deep sea. But if I can nail this transition, I can show you. No, I did not nail that transition. Hold on. Where's my canyon video? All right, let's try this canyon video. There we go. Nicely done. This is a brand new animation that MBARI came out with recently. You can see there's MBARI, the Monterey Peninsula there to the south. And looking out over this bay, if you were to drain the ocean, you would see that we effectively have the Grand Canyon out here underwater. The Monterey Submarine Canyon is 2 miles deep of ocean at its deepest point, and it's a mile deep from the rim of the canyon down to the bottom. So imagine you take the Grand Canyon that we all know and love, and you put another mile of water there on top of it. And in these depths, you have lots of different cool critters on the seafloor, on the walls, in the midwater, all the way to the surface. And so we'll be talking about various animals that we find in this canyon along the slopes of the canyon, but we're also going to be talking about the shallow water cephalopods, the cephalopods that you may find on a snorkel, on a dive for yourself here locally. So in case you were wondering why we are out there looking at all of that deep sea loveliness, it is because of our access there to that submarine canyon here. Now, if I can just figure out what is going on with these videos. Okay, nicely done. So that intro was totally worth it. I'm so glad y'all stuck around to do it. But with that, I'd like to maybe kick it over to Crissy real quick. If you just want to tell us a little bit about your work with the shallow water cephalopods, and then we'll continue on with Ben down into the deeps a little bit later.
Sure. So a lot of people think about cephalopods, when many people think about cephalopods, they think about these animals that can change color really quickly. And that's probably the most famous trait that cephalopods have. And people ask, how do they do it? What's behind all of that? And what good is that for them in the wild? And so I have behind me a picture of a baby hatchling blue-ringed octopus. This is from video that was taken by Roy Caldwell, my major professor at UC Berkeley. And if you look behind me, I'll try to get out of the way here. They're the little tiny dots on the top of, let's see, I can't really point because my finger moves away. If you go up, there we go. These tiny dots here, those are chromatophores. They're little sacs of pigment inside of the octopus's skin. Cuttlefish and squid have them too. And they have muscles around them that can allow them to expand and contract. And if we can see, the little chromatophores on the top are small because the muscles attached to them haven't pulled them open. If we look at the ones toward the bottom, the muscles have pulled them open, and we can see the color that's in that little pigment sac in the skin. And as cephalopods mature, their skin develops further and they get more and more complex skin patterns, but the underlying mechanism behind that is these chromatophores. And the location of the chromatophores on the skin is fixed. They can't move their chromatophores from one part of the skin to the other. And the colors that are in them are also fixed. So a chromatophore might develop a little bit of color change within its development over time as it ages, but a green chromatophore isn't going to become a pink chromatophore in its lifetime. And so that sort of sets some constraints on how cephalopods can change colors. And as cephalopods have evolved, one fun fact about them is that they don't see many colors. Really, they see, one color. And so we look at a scene like this, there is an octopus in the middle of this frame. And that's an animal in Hawaii, and it has an amazing ability to match its color and texture of its background. And this animal is not described by science. It doesn't have a scientific name, but there are lots of cephalopods in this world that don't have a scientific name, but we can tell that they're different from the other ones out there based on their body's form, but also by what they look like in life. And there are lots of octopuses actually in Hawaii that maybe they haven't necessarily had a lot of scientific research, but there's a rich cultural understanding of the octopuses and other cephalopods in Hawaii and throughout the world. And it's a great chance for people all over the world with lots of different cultural understanding of how animals behave and look in the wild to really contribute to scientific understanding by sharing, their pictures and video of cephalopods in the wild to really help all sorts of people understand what they look like in different habitats. And so, Patrick, I don't know, when we think about cephalopods and color change, do you have any pictures or images of a flamboyant cuttlefish?
Yes, I do. Yes, I can bring one of those up real quick.
That would be great.
Okay.
And so, cephalopods have this ability to change color. for animals that live close to the bottom, they're able to match their background. Even though they don't see color, their predators can see color. And so the predators have evolved this, taken part in this natural selection process, eaten the ones that aren't good matches and the ones that are good matches to their background and have great camouflage, survive and reproduce. But every once in a while, we see a cephalopod that has some really zany looking colors, and the flamboyant cuttlefish is an example of that.
I'm working on getting you one that has
Okay.
the appropriate coloration right now, because the newer photo that I have has a purplish tint from some fun lighting that was used. But yeah, keep going, almost there.
Okay. And so, there are cephalopods that have really high contrast colors. And are they warning colors? Do they serve some other purpose? And it's really important if we can study them in aquaria and we can get an amazing sense of what they look like in aquaria, but it's also really important to look at them in the wild to sort of test these ideas of what color change or different camouflage abilities might do for these animals in the wild. And
I'm almost there.
okay. Sounds good. And so here's a little interesting thing about the flamboyant cuttlefish that we're about to see. They might be venomous and potentially also poisonous. Venomous is when an animal is toxic. You get a toxin from the bite. Poisonous is if it's toxic to eat. And so it's possible that these fantastic color patterns that we're looking at are part of that warning coloration. But I'm also going to show some video behind me that gives a sense of what these animals look like in the wild. So I'll get out of the way here. What we're looking at here is a video from Indonesia of flamboyant cuttlefishes in their natural habitat. Flamboyant cuttlefish in their natural habitat. We can see the really big one on the right is actually very well camouflaged. And the small ones on the left are also, they're showing their color patterns, but they're also, kind of blending into the background as well. And so even though this color pattern is pretty incredible to look at, it's also serving as a little bit of camouflage considering how complex their natural habitat actually is.
Crissy,
Awesome.
we
Yes.
actually have kind of a great question, two questions that came in related to the flamboyant cuttlefishes. Folks are curious, if they can't see colors, how do they know how to match the background? And another person, very perceptive, picked up on this. Any thoughts on how polarized light helps in cephalopod communications?
Yeah, so those are great questions that come up a lot. How do they actually match their background? And I'll be totally honest with you, there's still a ton of mystery left. And so if you're thinking about going into science and going into cephalopod biology as something you might want to study, just know that there are lots of unanswered questions related to this. We know that they do take in information about the sort of size of things around them to help them guide their color change. We know that they are able to have really good sense of contrast, and so that allows them to match their background pretty well. It's also possible, and it's been hypothesized, but not truly proven yet, that the shape of their pupils actually might help them maybe not see color the way we see color, but differentiate different wavelengths of light. And so I'm showing a cuttlefish behind me. You can see that its pupil is shaped almost like a W or a U-shaped pupil, and that might help them cut down on glare. It might also help them differentiate something kind of like colors. That's kind of debatable, but there's there are a lot of questions that can be tested. There are a lot of different ways to look at that hopefully people will work out in the future. Octopuses don't quite have that shape of pupil. Their pupil is more rectangular, almost like a slit, but it's possible it might do something similar. But really, cephalopods can't quite see colors the way that we can. This octopus can't necessarily tell the difference between blue and orange. They're opposite colors if those colors have the same brightness and contrast. And it really does seem like, although they have some capabilities to control their camouflage, that the fact that their predators can see color has been involved in their natural selection. The question about polarized light was a great one. They can see polarized light. We can't do that. Our eyes don't have that built-in functionality, but many of us add that to our own vision by wearing polarized sunglasses. For example, I wear polarized sunglasses when I go to the ocean because it helps me cut through the glare of the surface of the water and see a little better into the water. And cephalopods have that built into their eyes. And that seems to help them in some cases catch prey more easily. Might cut down on the glare of their shiny fish prey, for example. It's been, people wonder, can they use this for communication? Because they can see, they have polarized body patterns we can't see, but they can see. But so far, people haven't cracked that code to understand how or even whether that's really an important part of their communication. But there's plenty of research that hasn't been explored. Lots of questions remain.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for sharing all of that there, Crissy. Let me bring back the rest of the panel real quick. So thank you, everybody who's been tuning in. I see a few new faces out there. If you haven't figured out what we're doing here yet, this is the Monterey Bay Aquarium and the Monterey Bay Aquarium Research Institute here for a very special Cephalopod Week live stream here. We've been chatting with Crissy about some cephalopods. We've been answering your questions. And then coming up next, we got some more things related to the deep sea. But thank you so much for tuning in. Emily, what are some of the questions we might have here just off of what Crissy might be talking about? And then we're gonna dive down a little bit deeper because cephalopods used to rule the oceans back in the day. And so they're everywhere. So we've been talking about shallow. We're going to go a little bit deeper, but in between, Emily, what do the folks want to know?
Yeah, we've had a lot of great questions coming in. I'm going to start with one that actually has to do with something that we were talking about before we even went live, Patrick, about cephalopod lifespans. So folks are curious. They've heard that octopuses typically have fairly short lifespans. What about the rest of our cephalopod friends?
Yeah, Crissy, you want to take that one real quick? Then we'll go over to Ben.
Okay. A lot of cephalopod lifespan correlates with the water temperature in which they live. And so a lot of shallow water cephalopods live in fairly warm waters and, but even shallow water cephalopods that live in cold waters, their lifespans are pretty long. A lot of the coverage about cephalopod lifespan talks about the end of the life being this time when the female lays her eggs and she sort of sacrifices herself for those eggs. But it's actually the case that even when a female lays eggs, even if those eggs are infertile, or if something prevents her from laying eggs, her lifespan is kind of predetermined. It's already going to be short. So it's not that the laying eggs leads to her dying. It's that she's laying eggs at what would naturally be the end of her lifespan anyway. And the same is the case for males. The males kind of die at the end of that lifespan anyway, and that happens to be a fairly short lifespan. Most cephalopods, octopuses, cuttlefishes, squids, actually reproduce in sort of one round of maturing eggs and sperm, and they reproduce toward the end of their lifespan and release all of their eggs, lay all of the eggs kind of in one round. But there are some that lay their eggs in little batches toward the end of their lifespan and might be able to expand that period of egg laying, might be able to prolong that a bit. But for the most part, most cephalopods have a short lifespan that includes one major round of reproduction.
And Crissy, since we were talking about kind of the changes in color patterns and chromatophores, we had another great question come in over on Twitch. Are cephalopods able to mimic patterns not found in nature? For example, if you were to put them in like on top of a checkerboard, would they be able to mimic that?
Yeah, that's a great question. The short answer is yes, if their skin anatomy allows it. And so they are, if they're put onto something like a background with small dots, they'll have on their skin, and this is species dependent. Not every species can do this, but the species that have great color change abilities would produce small little patches of color, maybe dark spots on their body, and patches and sort of clumps of that pattern. If you put them on a larger, like a larger checkerboard, they would make larger patterns on their body. It would, at some point, they're bound by their own anatomy. Like they might not be able to get the exact square of the checkerboard, but they would get like the gist of the checkerboard. They would get the impression of the checkerboard by kind of reproducing the size of the checkers and the spacing of the different colors on that checkerboard, even if they don't get the colors themselves right. They might be able to produce a black and white checkerboard pretty well, but not necessarily like a purple and orange one if they don't have purple and orange chromatophores. And there's some pretty good work on cuttlefishes doing this.
Awesome. Well, cool. Well, thank you so much, Emily, for those questions there from the audience. Keep sending those along. We've got, again, Susan and George and Cassie here that are out there answering your questions there. But I wanted to dive in a little bit deeper, as it were, and go with and talk to Ben a little bit because these are some of the things that the shallow water cephalopods are doing there. Crissy was talking about. There's a lot of color variation and things there, communication going on also between those individuals. And then down in the deep sea where there's maybe less light, you might think, oh, maybe the cephalopods aren't really doing much in terms of changing color or anything like that. But it turns out that cephalopods are communicating across a wide array of communication styles in the deep. So maybe I'll kick it over to Ben as a transition to go into the deeper water. Tell us what's going on with deep sea cephalopods. How are they communicating with each other with less light around them?
Oh, fantastic. Well, I'll just start by pointing to the squid behind me right now. So this is the California market squid. And this is a species that I think is pretty emblematic of the type of cephalopod that sort of treads the transition between shallow and deep water. So Crissy was just talking to us about, reef living animals, shallow living cephalopods. And this is a good intermediate species because this is a species that really the main thing that ties it to nearshore shallow areas is the end of its life that we were just talking about when they reproduce and lay eggs. So this species and many others that are related to it, they have to lay their eggs on a benthic substrate. And they can't lay them too deep because the eggs will be in too cold a water to develop properly. So they're after like pretty shallow water. But aside from that, this species will spend most of its life, usually away from the coast in this giant habitat that we would call the midwater. And so the open ocean or the midwater is the largest inhabitable space on the planet. It's over 95% of the biosphere, and it's a habitat that's really hard to conceive and to like picture ourselves in because it's just so different from what you and I are experiencing right now. Right now, I'm sitting in a chair. There's lots of light. I'm looking outside. Well, the midwater of the ocean, the open ocean, it's a habitat without walls. It's typically dark, dimly lit. And that is the habitat that this species primarily inhabits, and a lot of other squids as well. So squids are a type of cephalopod. You can see on this squid, it has The chromatophores, just like Crissy was pointing to, and I believe it was a little baby octopus. You can see all these little dots all over the animal. Those are those chromatophores as well, the things that cephalopods can use to change their pigmentation patterning or their color. Now, the fact that this animal has them is a pretty big clue that, you know, it needs to be able to change color as well, or its pigmentation patterning, just like the deeper living species as well. Now, this is a species that will typically come into well-lit waters, at least at some point in its life. So it's perhaps not too surprising that it has these patterns as well. Now, there are many other kinds of squids that perpetually inhabit the open ocean. And what I mean by that is they are born in the open ocean, they live in the open ocean, and they die in the open ocean. They live their whole lives without coming into contact with the hard surface. And what they typically do in that habitat is they live under perpetually low light levels. So they will live down deep in the ocean during the day. Usually they do this process called daily vertical migration, where when the sun rises, they dive down deep into the ocean. And then when the sun sets, they tend to come up shallower. And there's many reasons that they think they do this. Largely, we think it's, you know, to hide from predators and to find food. That kind of dictates their vertical movements. Now, I'll just go ahead and show some video of a squid in the deep, also just behind me. And what you'll be able to see in this case, this is a Humboldt squid. I should get out of the way. It's probably right behind me at the moment, but it's a Humboldt squid. And this is an animal that, so you can see this animal's fins and its arms and its eyes, very dynamic animal. It looks a lot like the shallow living species. And what you'll see in a second is another squid come in. They'll do a bit of color changing and attack each other and go away. But the point is, there are squids down in the deep that have the ability to change color. And it's been sort of a mystery as to why they do this. There's obviously some reasoning would be like, well, you know, maybe they need to hide, do some counter shading. They can camouflage, even though this is not a complex habitat like a coral reef. You know, there's still sunlight up at the surface and it's dark down deep. And so perhaps to hide from predators, you might consider counter shading yourself. So you'd color yourself dark on top and light underneath, sort of to match your surroundings. But if you watch these, so this is the same species, perhaps in a more dense group. So these animals, something that's important to point out, oftentimes there are species that are social. So they live in groups. So Crissy showed a video earlier of two small cuttlefish kind of going with a bigger cuttlefish. So there's some social behavior right there for you. So here's some Humboldt squid social behavior happening right behind me. This is happening down in the deep ocean, hundreds of meters below the ocean surface. So hundreds and hundreds of feet. This is a dark habitat. And if you pay close attention at these squid, they're not just counter shading themselves. You'll actually see them darken their fins. You'll see them color their entire body, half light and half dark, down the long axis. If you're particularly perceptive, you'll see little dots on their head appear. You'll see all sorts of little things happening. Now, here is where being able to communicate probably comes in handy. And it's pretty likely that they're using their pigmentation patterning to do so, to talk to each other and maybe, you know, communicate information about what they're about to do, whether they're going to go catch prey or if there's an incoming predator, things like that, really basic information. But the problem is, this is a dark habitat. And so it's been somewhat of a mystery. So I'm showing Humboldt squid right now, but there are plenty of other squids that do more complex color changing behaviors than you might expect, such as the 8-armed squid or the octopus, Octopus delatron. I can't remember what the common name is, but it'd be really cool if you could roll
we call it the octopus squid here.
The octopus squid. I get it. I get some of those common names confused, but the point is that there are several different deep sea species that have been described so far that are capable of doing all sorts of these pigmentation patterns. So they'll have repertoires of pigmentation patterns. So here's some cool octopus squid footage. They'll have
it's back now.
Awesome. They'll have repertoires of pigmentation patterns that are, you know, you could think of them as kind of their, you know, the things they're able to express. And, you know, some deep water species can express, you know, a repertoire very similar or, you know, in comparable complexity to some shallow water species. And it's sort of, you know, it's been conjectured that that has to do with, you know, communication. And it's sort of been a mystery as to how these patterns are perceived in the deeper, darker depths of the open ocean. And, you know, if you see videos of these animals, like you're seeing right now, probably you'll see they'll have pretty big eyes. So they're probably good at seeing under low light conditions, but a lot of their patterns are quite subtle. And so perhaps they're doing something a little bit extra to enhance the visibility of these patterns. And so we have some research that came out recently where we think we've come up with, or we've identified their solution to this problem. And I'll just quickly give an analogy for shallow living species, communication with chromatophores, and what we think deep living species do. And the analogy would be, pretend you are trying to read a novel. You could read the novel in paperback form with a book. And if you're going to do that, you have to have light. You have to be able to shine light on the words of the page, as the words on the page of the book. And so you could think of shallow living cephalopods, their pigmentation patterns being much like these words on the page of a book. You need light in order to see them. But the deeper living species, at least some of them, we think have a trick up their sleeve. And I will go ahead and say the punchline now. The punchline is we think the deeper living species are a bit more like e-readers. So if you're reading that same novel on an e-reader, you can go ahead and take that e-reader into the dark, turn out the lights, and you'll still be able to read it because the words on the e-reader's screen are backlit. So, you know, your e-reader has a lighting that backlights the words. And so for these deeper living squids, like the Humboldt squid here, underneath their skin, which is where their pigmentation patterning all takes place, all the chromatophores are in the skin, underneath that, in the squid's body, are bioluminescent organs. And bioluminescence is a process by which animals, you know, produce light on their own. And so these organs you could think of as little lights that cause the squid to glow. It causes the squid's body tissue to glow. So they have these little bioluminescent organs all throughout their bodies. And what they're able to do is make themselves glow. And then they change pigmentation patterning on top of that. And so you can think of the squid in the deep ocean more like e-readers, and the squid in shallower ocean more like books, you know. And so that's a little bit about the communication. One thing I wanted to bring up something, because I have Humboldt squid behind me right now, something I wanted to bring up while we were talking about their lifespans that I think is a really cool thing that cephalopods can do that we just absolutely cannot, is they have incredible flexibility in their life history. So life history is how organisms allocate energy and resources throughout different stages of their life. And it includes how long they live, how big they get, things like that. So our life history is very fixed. Okay, so, you know, I was born, I hit maturity at a certain age, and I'll, you know, barring unforeseen things, I'll probably die at a certain age or in a certain range. And those things are all there is some wiggle room there, but those things are all fairly fixed. Now for cephalopods, especially the Humboldt squid and squids, that is absolutely not the case. Their life histories are not fixed. They're very flexible. So the squid behind me and the squid that are being shown right now, these Humboldt squid, you're seeing big versions of them. So these are squid that as they were growing up, they encountered habitats that were cool and full of food. And for a cephalopod, what that allows them to do is to continue to grow. So these squid that you're seeing right now are probably close to 2 meters long in total length, maybe a little bit less. So they're about as big as me, you know, a big human. So that's one. So Humboldt squid, they can live, like they've clocked them to the maximum age around 2 years old. So these squid, you know, they're born at about the size of a grain of rice. That's when they hatch out of eggs, and then they grow to 2 meters long in about 2 years, maybe not that long. And that's like if conditions are good, they will get big and live long. That's long for a Humboldt squid, by the way. 2 years, that's very long. But alternatively, if the Humboldt squid encounters poor conditions when it grows up, warm, not enough food, what they will actually do is they will, instead of trying to reach that huge size, they'll just go ahead and mature at a tiny size in a very young age. So maybe instead of growing to that 2-year lifespan and 2 meters long, they'll go ahead and mature at around 5 months of age and maybe just, 20 centimeters or 18 centimeters. Now, can you imagine, just stop and think about that. Can you imagine if humans did that? That would mean if you were walking around on the streets in a city day to day, you would see fully mature humans with babies that were about a foot tall. And then you'd see fully mature humans with babies that were, 10 feet tall. It's absolutely mind boggling. And this is a really interesting adaptation they have, and it fits their strategy of life. So these are animals that they respond very quickly to change, be it good or bad. If you think of squid or some other cephalopods as well, in terms of plants you might find in a forest, they're very much the grass. Whereas things like us and fish and all the charismatic vertebrates you might think of, those are more like the trees and shrubs. They take a long time to reach maturity, but once they're established, they do quite well. Squid do not. They're like the grass. So if a wildfire rips through and destroys all the vegetation, the first things to come back will probably be squid with their short life histories. They'll also be very quick to disappear. So they have these, very responsive populations. So that's just something that the flexibility in life history is something I wanted to bring up that I didn't quite get a chance to.
No, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing that, Ben. And then I'll just add on, and if you want to correct me there, but that maturing is happening at a younger age in a lot of Humboldt squid down off of Southern California and Baja, Mexico, due to what's known as the oxygen minimum zone, being an area of the ocean that's kind of rising up with climate change and making the habitat for foraging not quite as prime as it had been for a long time. Is that correct? So the Humboldt squid currently are maturing younger due to some climate change effects there of where they forage. Is that do I have that right?
I'm happy. Yeah. I'll clarify just a little bit there. I don't want to shoot you down because
please do. That's what this stream is for.
You're hitting some very key topics. So actually the OMZ expansion was originally, so the oxygen minimum layer, that the expansion was actually associated with those animals doing quite well, especially here.
Okay.
Because Humboldt squid actually, they have some physiological adaptations and behavioral adaptations that allow them to do very well in low oxygen layers in the ocean. So while other animals are suffocating and can barely stay alive, they're actively hunting and eating. So they're actually efficient predators in the OMZ, whereas the prey animals are very lethargic. The Humboldt squid could dive down into these layers and just buffet status. What seems to be causing their decline in size at maturity, in addition to having these low oxygen layers, is the addition of warmer temperatures, especially warming at depth. So when you get those two together, that seems to be a problem for them, because what they like to do is go down into these low oxygen layers and then come up to the surface and burn off their metabolic debt. So what you can imagine them going down into the deep ocean where there's low oxygen, it's like sprinting. They can do it for a while, they're pretty good, but at some point you need to stop sprinting. Otherwise you're basically gonna acidify yourself to death, because all that lactic acid is going to build up. So what they need to do is come back up to shallower waters to burn off that metabolic debt, to breathe a lot of oxygen and get rid of it, and then prep for the next sprinting session, if you will. Even though when they're swimming in these low oxygen layers, it does not look like sprinting. They're very relaxed. Or they look very relaxed. So the problem when it warms up, though, is that just makes it way more costly for them. So squid and other cephalopods are what we call ectotherms. They're cold-blooded. And so they essentially take on the temperature of the surrounding environment. And their metabolism, so our metabolism is regulated by our body temperature. We maintain our body temperature. That keeps our metabolism fairly consistent. We're oversimplifying here, but the squid, their metabolism kind of changes with the conditions they're in. And so if the temperatures become warmer, effectively what this does is it makes the squid burn through their energy. You know, they have to eat more in order to live in a warmer environment and grow. And so what happens when we see warming, like we have recently, the Humboldt squid, you know, they're trying to make ends meet. They're trying to eat enough food to sustain their metabolism. And they just can't make ends meet when it gets warmer, because usually what happens when it gets warmer, the same time there is also less food, because off the coast of California here and off the coast of some parts of Mexico is what we call an upwelling ecosystem. And the reason that that ecosystem gets cold and gets lots of food is due to alongshore winds. And when those winds relax due to large scale climate variation, we get warming of water and less nutrients being upwelled. And so all the smaller things that the squid eat disappear and the water gets warmer. So you can see how that can be kind of a double-edged sword for metabolism. So these animals will then, instead of just going extinct, they'll just go ahead and mature at very small sizes in young ages, kind of weather out the storm, if you will.
Gotcha.
Yes. Yeah.
That's awesome. No, thank you so much for the correction. I'm looking at the time. Incredibly, we are already coming up on 13 minutes left here for this for the Cephalo party here. I guess we're currently doing a Cephalo podcast, as it were. I wanted to give Crissy an opportunity to respond to Ben from the shallow water perspective. I'm going to try to create some fake tension between shallow and deep water cephalopod research at the moment and see who comes out victorious. No, but Crissy, did you have anything you wanted to add on to everything that Ben was mentioning about what's going on in the deep?
Yeah. I think, yeah, it is fake tension because Ben and I
come on.
quite well, but cephalopod
I am
researchers
jealous
respect
of
each other.
cephalopods.
Okay, so there's some jealousy. All right, we'll take that storyline to the end. That'll be in the edit to make sure that we had the okay.
Yeah.
And I love salmon. So but I think something that people don't necessarily quite capture, but I think is important to note, is that we think of midwater cephalopods as being completely exposed from all directions to predators. I mean, a predator can come from below, above, from the sides. They have to look out constantly. And that actually is the case in for shallow water cephalopods as well. And so what I'm going to show here, you know, we think of cephalopods dealing with fish predators. You know, there's a barracuda behind me. I'll duck a little bit so that it's a little easier to see the barracuda swimming behind me. There's something that always wants to eat from above, but for many cephalopods, there's also something below that also wants to eat you. This is a manta shrimp, a stomatopod. You can see its eyes sort of at the top. Not those purple things, those are cleaner shrimp. But that manta shrimp is waiting in the sediment, in the mud, to lunge up and eat an octopus. This is a flounder that is also well camouflaged, waiting in the sediment to come up from above. This is a stargazer that's, you know, looking to lunge up and catch cephalopod prey. And so there really are predators everywhere.
Just to interrupt, stargazers look like somebody who's been staring at the internet a little bit too long during the day. I recognize a few social media managers' expressions, but yes, stargazers are a famous. Sorry to interrupt, but just had to throw that out there. I always love that.
We have a stargazer at the aquarium.
We do
right now.
Really?
Yeah,
That's great.
It's in our tube anemone exhibit. It's the one fish besides our angel shark I feel like nobody knows exists inside the aquarium. So for folks who are going to visit, stop by the tube anemone exhibit, and if you're lucky, you might be able to spot it in there.
So anyway, sorry, Crissy, back to you.
Yeah. Something else that shallow and deep water cephalopods have in common is Ben showed that video of the Humboldt squids flashing on one side of the body but not the other. This is a larger Pacific striped octopus. They live in Panama, in certain parts of Mexico, and you can see the animal in the foreground is flashing these different body patterns in the beginning of the video. It did it on one side of its body, but not the other. If you notice behind my head, that's actually a female octopus and then aquarium behind it that it can see. So it's signaling to the female on her side. But if they're, in theory, if this animal were in the wild, it might not want to show that signal everywhere. So it's only signaling it on half of the half of the body that needs to see that signal, and then the other half it's kind of keeping quiet. It's laying low so maybe the predators don't see it.
That's fascinating. I feel like most people do that internally and externally instead of having one side being chill and the other side. I think that'd be a really good adaptation if we could port that over to people, where you could just turn your stressed out or happy side to whoever needs to hear it. I feel like that'd be very effective nonverbal communication there. Sorry, Ben, you had something to say.
Oh, I'll jump in also with some more similarities. I think we have some videos too that would be cool to show. Yeah, so a lot of, speaking of like hiding from predators from all sides, shallow and deep, something you can do aside from just camouflaging yourself to the ambient background, you can actually go ahead and pretend to be something else entirely. You can do, you might pretend to be something that has stinging cells as an animal that might be an undesirable thing to eat, that might be slightly dangerous, offer a sting or something like that. And so, yeah, something we see in shallow and deeper living cephalopods is mimicry. And so in the deeper ones, we've seen them pretend to be jellyfish and other things like jellyfish. These are animals. So the jellyfish, these are animals that are not as good of a prey item as a squid would be. They have much lower energy density, and they have stinging defenses and things like that. So sometimes we see that out in the open ocean, mimicry that happens, the cephalopods will pretend to be jellyfish. Crissy, what happens in shallow water? What do you think pretend to be in shallower waters?
The mimic octopus is known for mimicking things like flatfish, but across the board, it's very common for octopuses and cuttlefishes to just look like something that's not a meal. And so this is a walking octopus. It's moving bipedally, and it looks a lot like a clump of algae where this octopus lives. This is an octopus that lives in Australia, Indonesia, the Philippines, and one of the big things that octopuses do is they look like algae. These cuttlefish can kind of match to the coral behind them and just try to look like anything other than a meal. But the mimic octopus, let's see, we have actually, I think somewhere we have a picture of a mimic octopus, mimic profile, Patrick, I think it's called.
Yes. Yeah, let me just pull that one up. And just for the folks back at home, I showed the video footage there of the Humboldt squid flashing, and then a little bit of a snippet of that mimicry that you were mentioning between the swordtail squid and the Cephalopods. We've mentioned that on a few of our live streams before, but here, let me pull up that mimic octopus. Mimic profile, you said?
Yeah.
All right. Let's see that. Let me just put it in a good spot. All right, it's up on screen, Crissy.
Okay, great. So the mimic octopus that lives in Indonesia, the Philippines, Southeast Asia, lives on sandy habitats, and it doesn't really have that much to hide in. Even though it has great camouflage against sand, it has also evolved a way to kind of be visible all the time. And it swims like a flatfish. And it seems like it evolved this ability at about the same time that it and its relatives, its ancestors, evolved very long arms. And so this allows it to have the shape of a flounder and other flatfish when it swims, but it also provides that biomechanic advantage of kind of having a low profile and a slim way of cutting through the water as it moves slowly across the bottom. Mimic octopuses are also thought to mimic sea snakes with two of their arms and other animals. As with a lot of things related to cephalopods, Mimicry is in the eye of the beholder. Whether I think something looks like a sea snake or something that's not tasty doesn't really matter. It's what matters to the predators. And so how effective these behaviors are as an actual defense against predation is not well studied.
Gotcha. Oh, that's fascinating. And I know the mimic octopus had its moment of virality, as a few different animals do out there. Shout out to Matt Inman at the Oatmeal. Or no, I think it was an XKCD. Yeah, lots of different mimic octopus content out there. I'm looking at the time. We've got just about 3 minutes left here on the official hour. We might go a little bit long, but this is usually the time that Emily takes a group of questions from everything that was going on out there and gives you a little bit of a rapid fire Q&A here. So we'll just have short answers to these quick questions from the folks out there, just to make sure that we tie up some loose ends. So Emily, rapid fire questions for Crissy and Ben.
All right, I've got quite a few questions. We'll try and make them rapid fire. But let's start with some truly rapid fire questions. Crissy, Ben, what are your personal favorite cephalopods?
And I'm so glad you asked this because I do have the video queued up right behind me. This is the robust clubhook squid, Onychia robusta, and it's the second largest squid species in the North Pacific. I think it scoots by the limelight a lot because it's not the biggest, but they are absolutely fascinating and we should learn more about them. You can see this animal right here is probably only a couple meters long, but they get much bigger, and they are very cool. So I'll just leave that playing.
Can you repeat the name for everybody?
The robust clubhook squid, or you could look up clubhook squid. They're often will be beached in Oregon, Washington, Alaska. People will find them on the beach. That's because when they die, they seem to use ammonia to regulate their buoyancy, and when they die, it builds up and they'll actually float to the surface and wash to shore. Whereas a lot of squids, when they die, will just sink to the bottom of the ocean. We never see them. So gotcha. Yeah.
And the scientific name is?
Onychia robusta. And one of my colleagues in Alaska, she's done some work on their stable isotopes, looked sort of at their diet, and they seem to feed it very high up in the food chain, like very close to what sperm whales are doing even.
Oh, so wow.
These things eat big things, probably like a big fish.
Cool. Right
really
on.
Cool.
All right, Crissy.
So my favorite cephalopod is Octopus aculeatus, the algae octopus. And this is an octopus that I've studied in Indonesia and Australia, and it kind of breaks the rules. It's somewhat social, and they interact with each other a lot. They live in these small groups in the wilds. They're one of the bipedally walking octopuses, and they have a lot of communication with each other, and they're just really a fascinating animal. And they also live very shallow. So they're an animal that you can see on snorkel. You don't have to scuba dive if you're ever in the areas where they live, but these and many other areas, many other octopuses throughout the world, including along our California coast, live in shallow water. Sometimes can be found in tide pools or while snorkeling. And so keep an eye out across the world on your respective coastlines and in your respective waters for octopuses.
Right on. Thank you so much.
All right, next rapid fire question. What is the smallest cephalopod in the world? And conversely, what's the largest cephalopod? I'll let you decide who wants to fight for which one there.
Ben, I'll take the smallest if you take the largest.
Sounds good.
Okay, so the smallest described cephalopod to my knowledge is Octopus wolfi, which is a tiny little octopus that is like thumb-sized at most, but some of them are mature at less than a centimeter long. And there's an undescribed octopus from Australia that's smaller than that. But we have not gotten around to describing that. There are also very small squids. Idiosepius is the genus. They're, in this 1 to 2 centimeter range, fully mature. And I believe the aquarium has had them, but I don't know if you do right now.
All right, so that's the tiny ones.
Mm-hmm.
The
Ben?
big ones. Yeah, on the other side of the spectrum, things that I don't think the aquarium, maybe someday in the future, you'll be able to have these, but so by length, it would be Architeuthis do. There's several subspecies. So those by length are the largest. That is the giant squid that we've all heard of. And those things get very long. By volume though, the largest squid is the colossal squid. So it's not as long as Architeuthis, but it is by volume a lot bigger. So they're a very massive animal, and those things are in the Southern Ocean. So around, but yeah, the Southern Ocean around Antarctica and slightly more toward the equator. Yeah, those are the two largest, colossal and giant.
Whew.
Right on. We have yet to
All right.
discover the gargantuan squid.
Well, I would propose actually calling the robust clubhook squid the gargantuan squid. You just need a catchy name to get it more attention.
All right.
So, there we go.
You heard it here first. Everybody who's watching around the internet, out with clubhook, in with gargantuan squid. You heard it here first. Just like a group of molas being called a guac of mola. Let's get this going. Let's make it part of the parlance. Gargantuan squid. Boom. We got you covered, Ben.
Can I throw in another one that I would like to pitch right now?
Oh, yes, please.
Some colleagues
Yes.
and I have we're seriously trying to get this out. Is what you call a group of squid? Okay, a group of squid. This is something that I get a lot, and here I'm going to show a group of squid right behind me. Okay, we want to call it a squad, right?
Yes.
Squad.
The squid
The
squad.
Squid Squad.
I've seen it on the internet before in various chat forums, but let's get the word out there.
Let's
Yes.
make
Those are
it
squads.
official.
Yes, please.
Yeah.
Yes.
If the cockeyed squid can become the strawberry squid and a group of molas can be a guac, then we can get the squid squad out there, everybody. So join the squid squad with everybody.
Yes.
Emily, it's 12:03.
Yes.
Are there any super pressing questions that we would be remiss to not have on the stream?
So I've got three more important questions, and then a very quick, very important question. Do we have time for all of those, Pat?
Yes, let's do that.
Okay. So we'll start with the serious ones here first. So Crissy, Ben, we've been talking about shallow octopuses and cephalopods versus deep sea cephalopods here, and kind of been using those two terms. But folks are curious, how do we determine what is a shallow water cephalopod versus a deep sea cephalopod, especially when you live in a three-dimensional environment where you might have some of those same species going back and forth between those two habitats?
Ben and I just arm wrestle to decide.
Yes.
Yeah, I would not want to take on Crissy. She's a surfer. She's strong. So,
But with your study species, you have plenty of arms as backup. So that's part of it.
Yeah,
No.
yeah. I've used in papers a threshold of if its maximum recorded depth is below 200 meters, but I think there are other ways to define it too.
Yeah. I think Ben's mention earlier of cephalopods that go up and down in the water column really shows that boundary is fairly artificial for some species. Some squids go to the surface at night and then might be down to 600 meters during the day.
Love it.
All
right. Another really great question that has been brought up across our platforms, and I love that all of our followers are thinking about this right now. We talked a little bit about climate change and its effects on squid. Folks are curious, are there any species that are more vulnerable to climate change, things that are happening in the ocean right now? And what are ways that we can help protect those animals in the ocean?
I think
Yeah.
any cephalopod that relies on hiding in a habitat. I'm showing behind me an area of, it's a marine habitat that's basically been leveled. It doesn't have its three-dimensional structure anymore. And so, sometimes the decisions that led to the habitat behind me being destroyed were made tens decades ago. The people who live in this area are not the people who did this. And so I think sometimes supporting activities that leave the seafloor intact will help protect a lot of animals. So understanding where your fish come from, understanding the activities that impact the seafloor, those will help protect the cephalopods that interact with the seafloor. Ben, I'll hand it to you to talk about things that would protect the midwater cephalopods.
Sure. I would say big picture evidence seems somewhat mixed about ocean acidification. So I'll just let that stand at that. But big picture, I would actually say people should be on the lookout for open ocean squids to be showing up in places where they historically haven't been detected. I think one thing that a lot of open ocean squids can do is they're very modal. They're very good at swimming. And, you know, if their body size is big enough, they can actually travel significant distances. And so something that people should be doing is paying attention to what's showing up in their local waters if they happen to live near the ocean, or talking to people that do. Because when squid invade a new ecosystem or come in a new ecosystem, you know, they're predators. So they can exert some effects on the communities that typically don't have them. So that's just something to keep in mind, is that, you know, I think as water's warm and things get more variable, species that typically aren't found in places start showing up, and they do things. A good example is like the Humboldt squid off the coast of California, Oregon, Washington, and Alaska about 5 or so years ago. So things like that, I think it's good to pay attention to. Aside from that, I'm not sure we know quite enough to say this is what you should do for squid out in the open ocean, aside from stopping burning fossil fuels and that whole lot of things.
Gotcha. Yeah, fundamentally changing our economic system is certainly at the end of the spectrum of those things there, but a thread to unravel for all of the folks that are back there at home. Just want to give an opportunity super quick here. For those of you folks out there who have been enjoying this live stream, thank you to everybody who's been tuning in on Twitch, on YouTube, on Facebook, on Twitter, all around the internet. Thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in. I did want to let everybody know that this is Cephalopod week, but not the end of live streams. We've got another one coming up on Monday on the aquarium side, but I wanted to make sure that Susan, right below here, had a moment to plug a really, really awesome live stream that's going to be happening with the MBARI crew coming up here at the end of this month. So Susan, the floor is yours here. Tell us about the live stream coming up here June 30th.
Thanks so much, Patrick. Yeah, we are having an event on June 30th at 11 a.m. Pacific. We're going to dive into it's called Live from the Deep, and we'll be going to Sur Ridge live. So you can actually come with us on the cruise virtually. And this is the first time that we're doing an event like this. We'll have scientists, aquarists from the aquarium, as well as researchers from the Monterey Bay National Marine Sanctuary. And you'll get to answer, and one of our ROV pilots, and you'll get to ask questions to our experts, and we'll be exploring the sponge and coral gardens at Sur Ridge. So we're really excited, and we hope you join us.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Susan. If you head over to our YouTube channel, either the aquariums and MBARIs, or if you're on our Twitch right now, you can see it in the VODs. We've done some live streams previously under the tagline Mysteries of the Deep about Sur Ridge, about that really cool area. So lots of really fun stuff coming out of that zone. And live streams coming up at the end of the month. So I just hope everybody here has made themselves a reminder. Make sure to give us a follow on the aquarium social channels and on MBARI's social channels so that you are alerted as to when that live stream is if you want some more fun stuff. With that, I just want to shout out all of the amazing moderators that are down here on the lower part of the screen. We got George, Susan, and Cassie, who've been knocking it out of the park there in the comments as well. Emily over there has been monitoring chats all across the world. Thank you so much for grabbing all those questions for us there, Emily. And I want to give... Oh, Emily, do you have something to say?
Oh, no. Do we have... time for another question, or are we wrapping it up, Pat?
I think we'll do one last question,
Okay.
and then we will conclude here for the stream. My belly is rumbling here. It's just about lunchtime, so I've just been hearing about all of the physiological needs of these animals, and I definitely have determinate growth and need to feed that system. So, but Emily, what is going on? What final question? Kick us off.
All right, we'll stick with the serious one then here instead of the silly one to end it, because it's really important. Because we have some people who have been lifelong fans of cephalopods who are watching right now. We also have some brand new fans of cephalopods who are watching right now, including some folks who are in school. They might be in college right now, in high school right now, and they are thinking about pursuing a career in the marine sciences. So we like to ask this of everyone. How did you get to do all of this cool stuff? And do you have any advice for someone who's looking to get into cephalopod science? And in particular, we had one person ask, is there anything that you would recommend someone study or volunteer or work at if they don't live close to an ocean, but they still want to be a cephalopod scientist?
So,
Crissy, you start, please.
Okay, I'll jump in and I'll put this video behind me because I feel like it answers a lot of that question from my perspective. Is I was motivated to go into marine science, and I love invertebrates. I have since I was a child, and so I went to college for marine science and had the opportunity to do an internship. I worked many summers, but one semester I did an internship and was provided the opportunity to study octopuses, and I just kept taking opportunities as they came, and wasn't well funded, but my priorities were to be in the water rather than to I wasn't picky about where I lived, and often was couch surfing, and that was my own particular story. But there are many different paths toward marine science and cephalopod biology. And I show the video behind me of the walking octopus. Might have to restart it here, because you don't have to be a diver to study cephalopods. You don't have to live near the water. You can be a computer scientist, you can be somebody who studies physics, you can study robotics, you can study cephalopods from lots of different angles. And the bipedal octopus behind me inspired the production of soft robots that move bipedally underwater. Computationally, it's really difficult to try to figure out how octopuses and other cephalopods control their bodies within the constraints of the central nervous system and the distributed nervous system that they have. So that's a computer science question. So lots of computer scientists are studying cephalopods as well. And so basically, if you have a topic that you are really good at and you love throwing yourself into and want to know how it's connected to cephalopod biology and might be able to contribute to cephalopod research, send me an email. You know, I'm easy to find on the internet, and I love helping people explore different ways to join forces with marine science.
Absolutely, I'll second that. It tends to be a case by case basis, but the main thing, if you're interested, reach out to someone who studies cephalopods, and I think each of them could give you helpful advice. I know Crissy certainly gave me helpful advice when I was searching for PhD programs and things like that. You may not remember that, Crissy, but I still have the notebook from the notes from that meeting. So that is one way that it can be done, and it worked out. So.
Yeah, we like to help each other out.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and oh man, I love that. I love your ideas of like, there's all these different areas where cephalopods can provide inspiration. Different areas of research, and so it's a good point.
Awesome. So to everybody out there watching, we have not crackened the code of cephalopods, of everything going on out there with them. Still plenty to learn, still plenty to find out, lots of places to explore not only what cephalopods are doing out there in the ocean for the ecology, for the world around them, but also how they're getting it done internally. So many different avenues there. I wanted to say thank you once again to everybody here for being on the panel. Thank you to all of the audience out there for tuning in. There is more Cephalopod Week content. Take a look at that hashtag for hashtag Cephalopod Week. Lots of stuff happening. You can head over to MontereyBayAquarium.org, and we have a Cephalopod Week schedule over there. And MBARI also has plenty of cephalopod content out there all across the internet that you can go and find and look for. And once again, last plug, June 30th is that Sir Ridge live stream. Very, very excited for that. Again, follow MBARI's social channels and the Aquarium social channels so that you know when that is. All right. Well, with that, everybody, thank you so much for tuning in to this special Cephalopod Week live stream where I tried and failed to have shallow water cephalopods battle out deep sea cephalopods for likes. It seems everybody is working together, just like the arms and suckers of our subjects today. So thanks so much, everybody, and we will see you again soon at the Monterey Bay Aquarium and the Monterey Bay Aquarium Research Institute's social media feeds. Happy Cephalopod Week, everybody. We'll see y'all again soon.